Hello and welcome to a new vlog from my kitchen. And one of my recent ones, I've mentioned that we've been on holiday in Greece and that we were not very happy with the food there. In the comments on that video, one of you suggested that I tried to make the Avgolemono soup. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Just to try and do some Greek cooking myself. So when I googled the soup, it looked like it's very much similar to what I do all the time, which is browning some veggies like onions, carrots, celery, adding chicken broth, adding chicken meat, cooking that up, but it has a few twists to it. One of those being there is also rice in it, which is what you saw me in the beginning wash and also let it soak so that it reduces the cooking time later. Once I'm done browning all the veggies and they've been cooking in the broth for a little bit, I add also the meat, which by the way, I've done a whole chicken before this, and I pick the meat off the bone, so that's the meat that I'm using for pretty much all of my soups that I do. So I didn't have any extra prep with this meat. And then the special ingredient in this soup is a mixture of lemon juice and eggs. And so what you do is you mix lemon juice and eggs, but also you add a little bit of the broth from the soup. I believe, or at least I've heard it everywhere called tempering. This method where you, I guess, add the hot liquid into the cold ingredient, the cold liquid. You want it still to be a clear soup, basically, with just the added taste of lemon and the egg sauce. You don't want it to be cooked eggs in a soup, I hope that makes sense. Anyway, so you do this so that the eggs don't cook too quickly. So you really have to make sure that you're whisking it up while you're pouring in a little bit of the broth. And you want to do it this way rather than pour the mixture of the juice and eggs into the hot soup, because that would be really difficult to whisk, and it would be more likely that the eggs are going to cook way too quickly and you're not going to be able to keep it nice and clear, the soup. Once you've made that mixture in a separate bowl, you can then take that and pour it into the really hot soup, but you should still be mixing it with a spoon or something to make sure that again, eggs don't cook and create these like blobs in your soup. Now what I've done is I've basically turned this into a bit of a risotto almost, as you can see from the texture, because I think the amount of rice versus the amount of broth in the soup were just not compatible, but it just didn't make a soup, it made more of a risotto because the rice just soaked up everything. But anyways, it was a very nice tasting risotto, and the lemon juice definitely gives this like a very different texture to what I would normally cook, or different taste, I should rather say. So it was really nice, and thank you again for the suggestion to make it. The next thing you will see me cook is meatballs with tomato sauce and pasta. Really the only thing here that I'm cooking is the sauce, because the meatballs you will see me I have in the fridge. That's something that I like to keep there usually, so I just, whenever I have a lot of ground meat, I make meatballs with it, and then most of them I store in the freezer. Sorry, did I say fridge before? It's in the freezer. So I take them out of the freezer, and then I get to the tomato sauce, which is like a very typical dish here in the Czech Republic. So what you do is you start by browning actually this tomato paste. So you put it into a little pot, and then just like you would brown anything else, you put the paste in it, but you do have to mix it quite often, pretty much the whole time, so that you're not burning it. So you put the tomato paste in, you also put in some cinnamon and a few cloves. That just gives it a little bit of a sweet taste, which it actually is a pretty sweet sauce. You will see me add sugar later as well. So you add that in, you're browning it, and then once after a few minutes you add in some roux. So what you could do is you could add just butter and flour, or if you have a little bit more butter, or lard. I was using lard to brown the tomato sauce. If you have some of it left, like on the side of the pot, you can just add the flour in there and make the roux there. But again, roux is something I have in my freezer, so I have that pre-made, and then I just use a grater. Is it a grater? I hope so. To grate some and then throw it into the pot. Again, mix it well with the tomato sauce. And then I'm also pulling out of the freezer some frozen broth. And I'm throwing that into the pot and mixing it well. And I'm using this tool, which I just have no idea what that would even be called. I mean, I guess it's like a whisk, but it's a very special one in its like shape. And it's so good for mixing things like this, where it's really important that you don't end up with some sort of clumps in it. It's like things that are very liquidy, but that could have lumps in them. So these sauces that are supposed to be super smooth at the end, but you're adding in some ingredients like the roux that need to be mixed into it really well. This thing is just perfect. It gets that job done so well. But anyways, so I'm mixing that in, and then just keep adding more of the broth as it thaws out. And then I mix it in, add more in, and so on until it gets the right consistency. Get the pasta ready, and then once about 20 minutes have passed since I started cooking the sauce, it should be about ready. So I start tasting it. I've already added the sugar in, and I'm also adding a little bit of vinegar and of course some salt as well. And then you have to, and that's I guess like the most difficult job I find with these things, is tasting it. And you just have to see what's missing. You just have to know what else to add. Like, does it need a little bit more sugar? Does it need more salt? Does it need more of the vinegar? Or have you already added too much of something? And I think that just comes with practice and doing this many times, and also kind of seeing like what is your preference, right? What do you like? I know that my partner doesn't like very much that vinegar. Some people do like it more, like with that kick that the vinegar gives it, but he doesn't. So I know I need to tone that down a little bit than maybe other people would. So you just have to keep adding in more stuff and then giving it a few minutes to kind of cook through, make sure the tastes kind of evolve and spread in all of the sauce. Taste it again, then see if anything else needs to be added, and so on until you arrive at your perfect results and you can serve it. All right, next up is what has become my favorite thing to bake, and it's, I believe one of you called it a shortcake. I don't know I hope that that's the right name for this kind of a cake, where what I'm doing is, it's just so easy. You mix a little bit of flour with maybe some milk, some sugar, some oil, eggs, and you bake that. Basically that's what it is. You can do it without fruit, but of course if you have some fruit, like in this case I had some red currants and some gooseberries, again coming out of my freezer and originally from our country house garden, it's definitely better if you can add the fruit on top of it. Now, I've already shared this recipe before, and in that video I believe I was giving you some tips on how to make sure that when you're whipping egg whites that you get to a good result fast. And those tips were to make sure you clean the bowl that you're using, and that you shouldn't be using plastic because it's too porous, and you should rather use like metal or glass, something like that, and that none of the egg yolks should be present in the mixture, because then that means that there is fat added to it, and that just prevents you from whipping it all up. Well, I don't know what I was doing here, but I couldn't have just completely ignored my own advice, and of course it took me absolutely forever to make those, to whip those egg whites. I didn't even get to the end result, like the proper end result that you're supposed to get to when you have all those stiff peaks and everything. But as it turns out, it's not really that crucial. Like, that cake was just fine. Like, I wouldn't know the difference between this one and the one where I had the egg whites like really well whipped. So I've arrived at the conclusion that the state of the egg whites is not super critical to the end result. So anyways, I've made that cake in one of the evenings, and then we had it for breakfast the next morning. And the last thing you will see me cook in this vlog is a cauliflower soup. So I found this really nice and fresh looking head of cauliflower at the store, and it was on sale, so I had to grab it. Cutting it all up into the individual smaller heads, and I am steaming those at first. Please ignore the red peppers on the stove, those are for something else. So I'm steaming those, and in the meantime, I'm preparing some onion and some leek as well. So I'm using the white portion of the leek for the soup and the green one again for a different dish, so don't worry about that. So I'm browning the onion and also the leek, and once those are brown, I'm adding in some of the cauliflower, not all of it. I did save a few of the nicer heads because those are then gonna go on top of the soup as like a garnish slash something a little bit crunchy in the soup. So I'm browning those a little bit as well. And then an important ingredient here as well is the spice, which here is curry powder. So I'm adding the curry powder, letting it, how do you say it, start to smell, basically browning that for a little bit together with those vegetables in there. And once it smells delicious, I can add in the broth. And also a little bit of cream. Letting that boil for about 15 minutes, and then I take my blender and I blend it all up. And then again, it's time to test it. I've added some salt, and I'm adding again some of that vinegar and tasting to see what else it might need. Once it's ready, I pour it in and add a few of those heads on top, and they really do make a nice touch. Alright, the last thing I wanted to share with you in the video is not cooking related, but rather decorating. So I'm sure you've noticed that we have this space above the fridge and the microwave where I have a ton of stuff, my cookbooks and lots of other things, and then nothing, basically dead space on top of that. And I thought that it would be great if we could add a shelf up there and kind of fill up that space and organize it a little bit better. And so I'm taking everything off that shelf, I'm cleaning that shelf, and then I'm also basically decluttering what was on that shelf, especially the alcohol. So, but there is also that huge glass jar that as much as I like it, I've used it once in the 4 years that I've had it. So I've decided to take that away, put it in like a little reuse center that we have here in our town where people can take stuff that they no longer need and anyone else can take them. And I'm doing the same with the alcohol. So some of the bottles I'm taking to our country house where we do lots of celebrations. So like the champagne or bubbly wine is going there. And then we're keeping some of the bottles here, and some of the unopened ones, they are also going into the reuse center. And this is what it looks like now that the shelf has been added, and I get to redecorate, which is always fun. And it's always like a little game for me to figure out, okay, what's the best configuration that I can do with this that makes the most sense practically, but also looks great. And I've decided on this, which isn't too different from what it looked like before. It's just that you can see those nice alcohol bottles at the top, and I've decided to also pull 2 of our like whiskey glasses or whatever you call them, which I'm sure some of you are like, oh no, those are gonna be full of dust in no time, and I'm sure they are, but I do like the look, so I'm willing to put in a little bit more work to cleaning it, at least in the beginning. Maybe I will get tired of cleaning it after a few months, but I really do like how it looks like now. It adds so much interest to that corner of the kitchen, plus it takes your eye higher, and so the space looks bigger, even though you obviously haven't done any extensions of the space, but it just is a much better solution than what it looked like before. Plus the light, when it hits those glasses in the evening, it's just so pretty. I think the camera isn't really doing this justice, but it really is beautiful. Anyways, that was my little redecoration. I hope you've enjoyed that and all of the cooking I did in today's video, and I'll see you next week. Bye!